r/us credit. What happened at a wedding that let you know the marriage was going to end in a divorce? Not a wedding but a proposal. Girl is a good friend from HS. She was 20 when this happened, and the guy was 21. Guy proposes by changing his FB status to engaged and posts girl's name. What you think? And she responded on FB sure. Engagement lasted a month. Asked her about it later, seeing as agreeing to something like that seemed out of character for her. She told me at first she thought it was a joke, and then when she realized he was serious about marriage thought maybe he was just asking her if she was ready to become engaged and that the real proposal was coming. Nope, that was the proposal. He even started trying to plan the wedding, to which she replied, you haven't even proposed yet. I mean, he hadn't even gotten her a ring, which I know you don't have to, but come on. After she realized that was his way of proposing, she ended the engagement, and he left her with, if we aren't going to be engaged then I don't see a point in staying. Poor girl was really broken up about it, but I think she dodged a bullet. He didn't look me in the eyes during the entire ceremony. He stared at the preacher the whole fucking time. Gave me a kiss on the hand when it was time to kiss the bride. Also, didn't tell me that his father was a sexual pervert that wanted to pound me. He thought it was normal and okay for his dad to think this about me. Edit. I truly didn't expect this to gain this much attention, but thank you guys for commenting and asking questions. I was having a shitty day earlier, but remembering some of this crazy marriage shit has given me a few laughs this evening and reminded me of how great of a life I have now. Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks again. Edit 2. Wow. First off, the top 5 list is posted under all these comments. I posted it last night before all of this really gained attention. I didn't expect anyone else to be interested this much into my story, lol. I haven't checked this since last night, about 12 hours, and there were a ton of more comments and questions. But thanks again, everyone. Bride was on her phone the whole time at the wedding. All her family and friends were there, so who was she texting? Turns out it was her boss, who was also at the wedding. And if you're thinking they were getting down to some sexy talk, you're wrong. The groom, now increasingly paranoid, later found a text sent by his wife during the ceremony which read, "I can't wait to start a family with you." He found that text whilst on honeymoon. Bear in mind too, that this girl had pestered him to propose for 10 years, and would cry on nights out, because he hadn't yet popped the question. Broke up a month after the ceremony, divorced in 3. Happy ending though. 3 years after this happened he gets married again next weekend to a great girl, and his ex is married too now I hear. I suppose even villains deserve a happy ending. I'd love to hear how they covered this whole shit show in the speeches at a second wedding though. This whole story has also reaffirmed my decision to avoid spending 20 grand to watch people I hate eat quiche. My lady and I will go on holiday, hire a priest and some monkey ushers, then get wasted and come home married. Edit. Clarifying that the guy's getting married this weekend, not the weekend after his last marriage failed. We hadn't met the groom more than twice before the wedding. Our friend had moved out of state, and so we didn't see them often. My husband is an artist and our friend asked him to draw a picture of the two of them, just a simple sketch, to make copies of to use as a coloring sheet for kids at the wedding. He'd given me an odd vibe when we'd seen him before, but I was wrapped up in visiting with my friend who I didn't get to see enough, so I figured I just didn't know him well enough. When my husband and I went to hand him the copies before the wedding he was very curt and emotionless. As we were about to leave the room it was like a light went on, and he graciously thanked us for the picture, and thanked us for making the trip. It was as if he was an alien that remembered he had to act like a human. I had a terrible feeling, but who stops a wedding and says, "I don't know this guy, but he acted funny a minute ago so stop the wedding"? Within a few months of the wedding he became violent and threw her out of the house because her hair clogged the shower. She came back to get her things and he'd thrown them out in giant garbage bags with cunt and whore written on them. He bugged her car and began to show up places he knew she'd be so that she'd be intimidated out of events she wanted to attend, of places she wanted or needed to go. He even made a scene at her office. She changed her name to throw him off her scent. When she ran into his parents, right after he'd thrown her out, she broke down and told them what was going on. They told her they were sorry, but he'd done this to a previous wife. They didn't say anything because they'd hoped he'd changed. The whole lot of them are sociopathic. This was a few years ago, and she's doing great. Very happy, healthy and thriving, but I worry she may never feel like she can be with someone again. I went to a wedding 2 months ago that I really hope ends in divorce because of how miserable the situation is. First, some context. This is the first and only man the bride has ever dated or had sex with. He has punched twice and pushed her over many times. B has cheated on her 3 times. Now for the wedding. The ceremony was 15 minutes and done outside in a city square. You could hear nothing. They had no vows. The kiss was lip to lip and lasted maybe 1 second. The after party was worse. The groom got shit-faced. The bride, pregnant, sat with a miserable look on her face all night beside him. They had a cupcake tower instead of cake, and in the process of doling out the goodies, the bride dropped one. The groom snapped at her those cupcakes are $5 a piece, and demanded she pick them up without even offering to help. Their first dance was middle school levels awkward. Zero chemistry. The playlist sounded like it was made by a middle schooler. As a cute little joke, the maid of honor told the groom in her speech to lay your hand atop your wife's. Remember this moment, because it is the last moment you'll have the upper hand in this relationship. The groom pulled his hand away, smirked, and said, like hell it is. I could really go on and on with how awful the whole thing was. The worst thing was the bride's expression. Like a damn wounded animal. Several things. The bride's 18th birthday was 7 days before the wedding. The groom was just a few months older. Maternity wedding dress. Her belly was bigger than her dollar store silk flower bouquet. The groom's father officiated, but did not look the groom in the eye once the entire day. In the carpool the way to the reception, one of our friends started a betting pool regarding how long the marriage would last. I bet 1 year, and, as my get, was the closest to the actual time of separation. I won. Groom spent the majority of the reception standing outside and chain smoking cigarettes with his best friend, and the bride eventually followed a group of us outside and called the groom out for avoiding her. In front of all of their closest friends, he called her a clingy bitch and then stormed away. She grabbed a cigarette out of my hand, remember, she was pregnant as hell, and said, I fucking hate him sometimes. They separated almost exactly a year later, though the divorce wasn't finalized for another year or so due to the multiple contentious court appearances and custody battles. One of my childhood friends got married at 17 to her boyfriend of less than 3 months. At first I was thinking, well I know plenty of older couples that got married within a month. I was made a bridesmaid, so I was behind the scenes for the shit show. First thing that I noticed was wrong. He called her by the wrong name throughout their engagement. She has an unusual name, so I'll let it pass, because I always just called her T when growing up. Second thing, the groom invited his ex-girlfriend to the wedding. You know, if you were good friends with your ex I can see maybe inviting them, but not a girl who will show up and cry the whole ceremony. Third, the condom pinata. Fourth, the bride's mother was so drunk during the reception she admitted that the bride's younger brother was the product of an affair with one of her patients, in front of the bride's father, her husband. And last but not least, the groom's father would not shut up about how he thought the whole thing was a mistake, and how his son deserved a real woman. He made some lovely racial comments as well to the bride's family, and when the bride asked the groom to get his father to stop, the groom replied that she should just get used to it. I'm a wedding DJ. I was given a request by the bride maybe an hour into what was scheduled to be a 3-hour dance. Normally when I get a request from either the bride or groom, I will ask them, do you want that now or at some point later? Especially if the song is not in the genre that I'm playing in right now. She told me that she wanted it now, so I queued it up on the deck that wasn't playing the current song. She walked away happy, expecting that her song would be next. Immediately after she left my table, the groom walks up to me and asks me what she requested. I show him. He half laughs and tells me not to play it. Conflicted and surprised, I ask him why not, to which he replies, she's an idiot. That song sucks. If you respond like that to a single song in a 3-hour dance, then there's no way that you are going to respond well to something more serious when it comes up in the future. Among DJs, we call people like this repeat customers. The bride, whom I didn't even know, apparently designated me to help decorate the reception hall prior to the wedding. I went to do so, and her mother was there, telling me in a hushed, scared whisper that I better not mess anything up, because the bride would be furious. Everything was to be a certain way, and if it was wrong, there'd be hell to pay. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, chalked it up to wedding anxiety, and during the reception I tried to chat with her a bit, and she literally rolled her eyes at me. I also didn't see her look at the groom once at the wedding or the reception. They were split less than a year later. The groom confided to me and my husband that the morning of the wedding he'd been filled with an overwhelming feeling of dread and spent several hours just sitting on his lawn, thinking, I shouldn't do this. But it was paid for. Tons of guests were waiting. Lots of family, including us, had come in from out of state, and he felt he had to go through with it. Apparently the bride had a history of being awful and controlling. No clue what made him propose to her in the first place. Edit. Just Facebook stalked the ex-bride. Her latest status update is announcing her wedding date with a new guy. Someone jokingly asked in the comments if they've set a date for the divorce. Oh snap. Holy shit. My cousin Jan's wedding was basically just a preamble to an elaborate dance of divorce that we all knew was coming from the moment the engagement began. For context, this took place 15 years ago in the backwoods of NC. My family is just a generation or two removed from snake handling in church, so some of the wackiness is the product of upwardly mobile inbreeding and redneck gumption. Just a few things that come to mind. Her fiance proposed to her over the corpse of her father. He was over with the family watching TV when Jan's dad collapsed on the floor. He died before emergency services arrived. Her boyfriend grabbed her hands as she was sitting next to her father's body, pulled her up to her feet, and then asked her to marry him. He later said that he didn't want her to get away. The fiancé then disappeared for a month. A week after the funeral, nobody knew where to reach him. The bride's white trash mother told Jan that she had to get married within 4 months because she, the mother, my aunt, planned to move to another state with her new boyfriend to avoid bill collectors. When Jan's fiancé showed back up, he was cagey and weird. Eventually, it came out that he'd been living with his ex-girlfriend because she insisted that he had to give her a month of his life or she'd take him to court for child support that he was supposed to be paying on their infant son but had never paid. Throughout all of this, Jan continued to insist that she wanted to marry him. My mother and I did most of the wedding prep and arrangements. Jan's mom, despite insisting on the 4-month timeline to help pay for the wedding before her move, never contributed a dime, and we were both pretty convinced that the wedding was going to be cancelled at any moment. But the day arrived, and so did the principal players. At the wedding itself, the groom walked around drinking PBR out of massive travel thermos with a novelty straw and told everyone who would listen that Jan was a good starter wife. Jan threw several tantrums about stupid shit, including one in which she accused the groom of stealing her drink. He told her she was a dumb whore, but it all worked out because then she found her drink. The groom pulled the ring off of Jan's finger during the reception and swallowed it as a joke. The groom picked a fight with his father because his dad had asked the ex-girlfriend to stay at home, and the groom had really wanted her to be there. Jan was in the dark about this invitation until the fight broke out. Epilogue, shocking precisely nobody, except possibly Jan herself. They eventually did divorce. Eating the ring caused the groom some discomfort, so they had to cancel their honeymoon to the mountains so that he could go to the and get hospital-grade laxatives. They lost money on the cancellation and the visit, which they really didn't have to lose. That resulted in some immediate debt problems. and they lost the trailer they'd planned to rent when they couldn't come up with the deposit. That resulted in both of them moving into the groom's parents' home, into his old bedroom. Things went downhill from there. The groom's ex-girlfriend popped back up less than 3 months after the wedding, heavily pregnant with his second child. She went after him for another shared month, but Jen wasn't cool with it. The ex ended up taking him to court for child support. Jen got a second job to make ends meet, while resigning herself to living with her in-laws for a while longer. One day, after he dropped her off at work, the groom sold Jan's car. He then disappeared for several more weeks. She lost both jobs, and shortly thereafter realized she was pregnant. The groom accused her of cheating, because he thought he couldn't have more than 2 children in a lifetime, and his ex-girlfriend had already filled the quota. As I understand it, this is what ultimately caused the rift in their relationship. My cousin married a nice, respectable girl from Connecticut, but he is a not so nice, not so respectable Massachusetts stereotype from Norfolk County. Cause got shit-faced with his band of Mickeys and Sullies the night before, and when I saw him for pictures that morning, he was sucking on a pint of Skull vodka before throwing it in the corner of the church and calling his friend a cork fag. He had the same shit-eating grin on his face for every picture. I pumped some coffee into him. We thought we had it under control, but during the ceremony he flipped off the guests twice. His brother also taped "Help me" on the bottom of his shoes for when they took the mass. The bride's father was furious. But then came the reception. My mom didn't want to go. I wish we hadn't. Cause continued sucking down booze, as did his pals. The bride, God save her, wanted to go ahead with the first dance, Stand By Me. Cause didn't put down his drink, was grabbing her ass during the dance, and finally spilled it all down her dress. She slapped him. He pushed her. Father of the groom charges the dance floor. The bench is clear. My brother and I ask mom if she wants us to get involved. She grabs her purse and says let's leave. As his buddies were holding Cuz back, she walked over, slapped him, and said thank God your grandmother died, you disgraceful little Mick. Mama is a very quiet woman. We grabbed Mama and hightailed it out. 2 cops passed us on the way in. They began the annulment 1 week later. I haven't talked to him since, although he emailed me asking if he could borrow $5,000. He lives in a camper, from what I hear. A bunch of my family members are betting on how long one of my cousin's marriage would last. It's definitely going to end in divorce, but we just don't know when. Here's all the shit that happened. Pre-wedding. The couple can't even agree on invitation card designs, so they decided each would have their own. Some people received 2 invitations. Wedding. They're both from different races, and the groom's family insisted on having a wedding ceremony from their culture too. The bride refused the part where she has to kneel before her husband and wash his feet clean. The groom's family insisted, and she was stuck doing it. The bride got tired with all the photo taking and refused to pose for any more photographs, even though she hadn't taken photos with the groom's extended family. Meanwhile, she had already taken photos with her entire family, extended family, and parents' friends. The groom's cousin told the bride she walked in elegantly, and she spent hours crying and refusing to come out for the wedding dinner. Half the groom's family boycotted the wedding over the bride's race and religion. Post-wedding, the bride insisted they should fly first class for their honeymoon. The groom insisted it's a waste of money, even though they both come from money. The bride flew first class, the groom stuck to economy. My cousin got his casual hookup pregnant and somehow they came to the conclusion that they needed to get married. Instead of going and getting quietly married, they decided they needed a gigantic expensive wedding. Like 5-course meal, 300 plus guests, 12 bridesmaids, kind of wedding. Obviously, something like this takes a while to plan, and as a result, she was about 7 months pregnant. Now, nothing wrong with going down the aisle while expecting, but she chose this corseted dress that was cinched so tight it nearly flattened her bump out. As someone who has been pregnant, I can't imagine how uncomfortable that must have been. The fact that they had only known each other 8 months, and she was 7 months pregnant was like the elephant in the room the entire wedding. She refused to acknowledge the fact that she was pregnant. She had been out of college for 10 plus years and invited all her sorority sisters. They got up and all sang this weird sorority song together. Very odd for an over 30 woman. I'm probably not explaining it very well, but it was like she was trying to act like she was much younger. They were married about 4 years, way longer than anyone thought it would last. Not all of it was at the wedding, but on our way to our honeymoon, we were on a flight with this couple sitting behind us. She boarded the plane with a giant carry-on and a garment bag with her dress in it. Once they found their seats, she shoved her bags at him to put away and then went to use the lavatory for about 15 minutes. She was really nasty towards him the whole time. Fast forward to running into them at the resort. She was super stuck up and bitchy to every female and all of the staff. She didn't seem to have a problem grinding on 4 or 5 different guys during one of the dance night themed events, while her husband-to-be drank alone at the bar. Finally, the day of their wedding came, and my husband ran into the groom sitting alone outside at the cafe with a drink in his hand. He sat down to chat with him, and the guy explained that he was freaking out because they had no friends or family at the wedding, because literally no one that knew him liked her or approved of the wedding, and that he wasn't even sure what he was doing there. My husband tells him he's sure it's cold feet and to just have a drink to calm his nerves. The groom replies that this is his 5th drink. It's like 11 AM already. We had an oceanfront villa and they got married right outside of our back door. He looked like he was going to bolt for shore. I guess that was her plan the whole time, trap him on a remote island. Her vows. They were friends of mine who dated for nearly 2 years before their wedding. He loved her more than she loved him, obvious to all our friends, and we suspected she begrudgingly said yes to his proposal. He said his vows first, and went on and on about loving her for the rest of his life. During hers, she started with 438 days. That's how long I've loved you. It seemed sweet until she ended her vows with, and I promise to love you for at least 438 more. Most thought nothing of it, and some friends called me a dick for saying it was a subconscious sign she wasn't in it for the long haul. She left him exactly that amount of days after the wedding with a note that said, I kept my vow to love you for 438 days more, but I can't for a single day more. Called it. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.